Welcome to Satsang. Helen will be starting in a moment. For those in the room, thanks for keeping the silence before Satsang. I know you all know the Satsang guidelines. Phones on silent, please, not on vibrate. There's drinks that are 80p. We all know where the toilets are. Just remember to be quiet on leaving because it is a residential place. No eating in the throughout Satsang. We have a shop at the back with Helen's books and other items. Satsang consists of a talk from Helen and then one-to-one questions. If you have a question in the room, please just alert her and you'll be invited up. If you have a question online, just email it to the email address and then it'll be read out at the next Satsang. Before 5:30 on the day of Satsang or 10:30 on the daytime Satsang. If your live stream buffers, just pause and restart and you'll just get a bit of a delay, but you'll get it a bit better. This is the last Satsang before Christmas, the evening one. We have a daytime one tomorrow. Please arrive by 10 to 11 for the daytime one tomorrow. After that, the doors will be locked and no one will be allowed in under any circumstances. We have the Dissolving the Ego course starting in January. There is the odd place left on it. It can be done online for those that are not local to us. In January, we're restarting the Sangha meetup. That is just for people that are local and that can get to just meet up and have a couple with people, like-minded people. We have our retreat in March. There are places left, but it is filling. And we have our Satsang Intensive in February. All details are on the website, helenhamilton.org. We're asked regularly about donations. I've now put a bowl out for donations for those attending in person. No pressure, but we do get asked where to put them. Online, there is a button on the website if you want to leave a donation. The next Satsang after Christmas is the 2nd of January, which is a Thursday evening. I think that's it. Helen will be starting in a moment.
Welcome to everyone. All these brave souls, the last one before Christmas, dedicated, and everyone online as well. You really know you're deep into your awakening when you end up in a room like this before Christmas, don't you? Like, Namaste. And welcome to Satsang. So Satsang is a place where we not only study what reality is, but actually want to experience it deeply, to come to a seeing of what actually is real. starting usually with ourself, what I actually am. When that seeing has gone deep enough, it leads to a knowing of what everything is, because we ultimately come to see that there's just the one being. And if you know me at all, you know I'm not very good with verbal metaphors. No laughing at the back. But I love it when something happens in an everyday way that really represents the awakening process. And something happened yesterday, which may seem like a really simple thing, but it's something I really just wanted to share. And every morning I sit with a cup of tea in my front room, and yesterday, I think it was really icy outside. So across from me, you know, I'm sat here and there's a blank wall there and the window, and there's cars parked outside with their engines on, and the people are scraping the ice off the car. And on the windowsill in my house, I have a little Buddha statue. You know, bit cliche for a spiritual teacher, I know, but they're all over my house. And this car started its engine up, and its lights came on and cast a shadow onto this Buddha statue on the wall. And I thought it was really, really pretty. And when I looked at it, there's one statue on my window on the ledge. And when I looked at the wall, there's these two Buddhas, two reflections. And I thought, wow, that's really amazing. That is exactly what happens. When the light hits this object, it refracts into this illusion of two. And as I sat there, I was just kind of mesmerized watching this. And then the two houses down from that, so there was this car coming from this side, and another one then switched its lights on this side. So suddenly there were 4 Buddhas on this wall, where there is only one sat there all by himself. And then when one of the cars decided to leave, they must have, you know, got ready to go. Some of the Buddhas started moving and dancing on the wall as the lights moved, you know, and then turned the corner and drove away. And it just struck me how absolutely perfect a metaphor that is. You know, there is just the one being that is everywhere, all the time. And when it shines through a human body, all of a sudden there seem to be all these Buddhas running around, all these little human beings, all these different beings running around. And if we never look at the origin of where the light is coming from, if we're only transfixed on the reflection on the wall, i.e. this world out here that we think is here, it's always going to seem convincing that there are lots of beings out there. I'm sat in this room here with all of you, and you're all different to me. That would seem very convincing, wouldn't it, if I only look at the reflection? And human beings are trained to only look at the reflection, to look at what we can see with our senses, what we experience, and what we think about. And to never ever look at the windowsill, at the one Buddha that's there, actually. We're mesmerized by all these shapes that seem to be moving around and having an independent existence. So satsang really is for sitting with your cup of tea and looking at the origin of the source of the light. Where does the light come from? What actually cast that shadow in the first place? What is it that shines on that little Buddha statue and creates this image that seems to come to life? And as the one being shines through all of these forms, in human beings, it can get very, very confused. It can come to think that it is actually separate, completely separate to everything else it sees. And it begins to think about itself. It begins to think about its likes and dislikes. It begins to think about what its senses are experiencing in that particular human body. And it decides that this is what I am. And then when this idea is grabbed here, that this is what I am, suddenly all you other beings come into existence. And you weren't there a few moments before. And so in reality, there is just the one. And satsang is a place to come and to begin to look at the source. You know, where did you come from? Where did this body come from? Where do all these thoughts appear from? And where do they go back into? Whether it's a thought that has a very momentary existence, or a human body, or a sound, or a mountain, or even the universe itself, where does it disappear back into? Satsang is the place to study this, to really look at this, to come to understand and to experience, more importantly. That if we don't think about anything, or if we don't reference thoughts, we're not really sure of anything at all. And that's not such a bad thing. We don't have to stop our mind. We just have to be willing to bypass those thoughts, to not automatically believe them, to be willing to temporarily withhold belief while we check out if it's true. And as we do this, begin to see the truth that there is only this one being, appearing as all of this, shapes coming and going, forms arising and fading away. And that just because it thinks it's separate in each being doesn't mean it ever actually really was. And that if we spend our life transfixed by the shadows on the wall, we're never going to see the truth. That there has to be determined and consistent turning inwards to look at the source of all of this, which is you. Your body, your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, your relationships. All of it depends on you. Without you, there's none of it. None of it at all. Without you, the perceiver, the observer of all of this, there's nothing to perceive. And when we really finally put attention on that which we actually are, finally, when we get to that point, what really am I? We can be surprised by what we find. There is only one subjective experiencing going on, not an experiencer, but experiencing is all we find. Something that is experiencing all of this, that we can't grasp, that we can't label as anything, except the fact that it's aware and it's intelligent and it's experiencing all of this. And we've just always called it I, perhaps never really gone any further than that. So in Satsang, we'll go through this tiny little question into infinity. What really am I? And open up into a massive seeing. And then you get to have your cake and eat it, because you can still perceive all of this with your senses, but not be confused anymore. Not be sure that you're separate and alone and needing whatever it is that we think we're needing. That everything I imagine that's outside of me and different to me is really me also. It's all the one being. And then even the word all must fall away in the end. There's just the one. That just because the shapes and the shadows on the wall look different, just because we all sound different, just because we all seem to like different things, just because our passions lie elsewhere, just because our interests and our hobbies and our relationships and everything are different, doesn't mean that we are actually different. Because you could make those shapes dance on that wall indefinitely. You could move them all around and rearrange them, and doesn't mean you've actually done anything different. It's still just the same thing that you started off with, the one being. And it is so vitally important to find out what you are. How on earth is your life going to function at its optimum if you're not even sure really what you are, if you're running off some old assumption that you've just believed to be true? Is it any wonder then that our lives haven't really turned out perhaps the way that we would have wanted them to? Is it any wonder that we don't wake up bursting out of bed in the morning, really excited to get on with the day? Because when you find out what you are, you also clearly find out what you aren't. And the plus side of that is that you can no longer believe any thoughts at all, ever again. When you come to see that I've never been anything at all in my truest essence, and yet I'm appearing as all of this, there's then a realization that everything my mind says is said to who I thought I was. My mind is talking to the person I thought I was, that separate being with all its wants and likes and dislikes and suffering and goals and dreams and all of that. Is it that easy then that you can just dismiss all of your problems from seeing what you really are? You won't even have to dismiss them. They'll just be clearly seen that they're not valid anymore to you, no longer. So I would really urge you to turn your attention away from the coming and goingness of all of this. Not because any of it is wrong, but because it's hypnotic. And you're stretching and flexing this muscle, learning to exert this muscle to stay focused inwardly on what you really are. If you do that consistently for a short time, you'll have a very clear seeing of what you really are, and what you really want, and what you really need, if anything. And then you can go back and play in the world and have fun. You can play with all the other beings that seem to be there and have fun and do all the things that you wanted to do, you know, without any fear or shame or guilt or anger or frustration or grief or suffering of any kind at all. Just be clear what you actually are. Just be clear of that. Everything else will fall into place in your world. Without you lifting a finger, everything out here will resolve itself the way that you want it to be. Doesn't it make sense that to enjoy the rest of your life, you should at least know who you actually are? Isn't that like common sense 101? Like, find out what you are and then go from there, you know? And it need not be this long, arduous journey. It can be a few really simple, clear seeings. Nothing can be hidden from you when you want to see. Nothing at all. If there is only the one being here, really, that's everywhere, then what can get in your way of this seeing if you really want to see it? Is there anything outside of you that can affect you, can slow you down? Even your own mind's resistance to this process will become powerless. Powerless completely. Or rather, you'll see that it always was. And I really have to tell you, there's nothing that you can experience that will match finding out what you are. Nothing at all will beat the joy and the clarity and the peace and the understanding and the sense of freedom and the love. And as that deepens, it begins to reflect with abundance in all areas of your outside world as well. It's not really that bad a deal, is it? A little bit of inner searching and seeking and questioning. For a lifetime, the rest of your life and any other bodies that come after this. Freedom. For eternity, you know. Well worth being in Satsang a couple of days before Christmas. Okay, we have a couple of questions. This one says, I've found my life has been very busy lately. I don't worry so much about this anymore, as I realize it's not me who is busy, with a capital M, me. However, my ego does kick in and question, how can you reach enlightenment when you are busy? So my question is, can you be enlightened and live a life like this? I imagine things slowing down, but that's not how it's appearing for me. And I wonder, is it because I'm not doing something I should be doing? Can you live a Western way of life? I work a normal job and have a normal home life and be enlightened. So I really, on my pathway, I really didn't believe that was possible. And really my entire life had to grind to a halt while I figured out that actually it really is possible. Can you be enlightened and live a life like this? Can you live a Western way of life, work a normal job and have a normal home life and be enlightened? So absolutely, absolutely. In fact, when our awakening is progressing, we might find that we tend to lose interest in that outer way of life temporarily. We might find our interest is drawn inwards. And all those things will still be going on around us, but we might lose our passion for those outer things temporarily. But as your awakening deepens and your enlightenment progresses, it very often turns out to be the opposite of how it's advertised. You know, sitting on the top of a mountain afterwards with a peace pipe and there have been those, obviously those awakened beings of the past that have done that. But I think our Western way of life is completely complementary to this. In fact, if we can function in our life and still work our job or run a business and do the school run and food shopping and all of that, then surely that, you know, and maintain our peace at the same time, surely that really is enlightenment. If our life is abundant in every way, of peace, joy, happiness, self-respect, you know, financial abundance as well, abundance of time, abundance of clarity, abundance of energy, abundance of well-being, that to me is enlightenment, where it's fully pervaded your entire existence. It's not just some inner state, you know, that is enlightenment has been mistakenly identified with inactivity, you know, with, and there might be a little bit of that as you have a big seeing. You might want to take some time to come to understand what you've seen, to assimilate it, but that will move. The truth will want to move again. It will want to. Whatever our life purpose is, is what the truth wants to do as this body, as that body. There's a thing that each one of us is here to do that we can do that nobody else can or ever will. And that's exciting. That's true enlightenment for me, when there's abundance in all of these ways coming in. Anyone can go and sit in an ashram or on the top of a mountain or find peace when we go on retreat, for the weekend. But can you do that in the rush hour on the M62 or on Christmas Eve in Tesco's? Or, fill in the blank, when your boss is having a go at your work or something? And how can we say that we're enlightened if we aren't fully living it in every single area? And for me, it's really been the opposite, that it's actually been the opposite. The more enlightenment deepens, the busier the body gets, because the more energy you've got and the more you want to engage in the world again. That passion returns for those things that you love to do. Most of it. Some of them will fall away because you were doing them just to get somewhere or become something or someone, But most passions come back and you begin to enjoy them in a way you never did before, because you don't need anything out of that activity. You're just enjoying doing what you're doing every day. So it's absolutely possible to live a Western way of life. And there are more and more examples of being awake. And of course, the Western way of life isn't really just in the West. It's everywhere now. It used to be that you'd have to sell all of your possessions at a certain age and go to the ashram, and that was it if you wanted to wake up. Now we're lucky that we don't have to do that anymore. I wouldn't have had a lot to sell at the time as it was. So absolutely, you can reach enlightenment when you're busy. In fact, I'd say it's easier when you're busy, because you've got to use the time that you've got wisely then. Don't be like I was and have too much time to sit around and think. It's certainly a doubt that a lot of us have. Am I still going to be able to do the school run and go to parents' evening and, do the food shopping when I'm awake? Or I'll be. You can still do it, you just sort of levitate your way along instead of drive. I'm still working on that one. This one says, I've found over the years that as much as I can get involved in ego thinking, I have the ability to drop it all at any moment. This often happens when it feels overwhelmed by life events, such as the madness of Christmas. The ego gives up grasping, something surrenders to what is, and I settle back into my peace. This lasts until life has settled down, I imagine, because I have allowed it to settle, and then the ego charges up once again. Is there any way to circumvent the ego rising up again to try to exert control? I am aware that it's not helpful, but I appear compelled to live this way. Hope this makes sense. So is there any way to circumvent the ego rising up again to try to exert control? I'm aware that it's not helpful, but I appear compelled to live this way. This is really the core of awakening happening. It's a really good question. Well, they're both good questions. So if I'm not absolutely convinced that there is only the one being, and there only ever was the one being, I may still experience this back and forth between an egoic way of thinking, a separate sense of self, being tempted to listen to that when it starts to talk. And then I'll experience this back and forth between not thinking about anything and then back into thoughts again. There isn't really any direct way to circumvent the ego rising up again, but you can absolutely know with clarity and conviction when it rises up that it's not talking to you, that it's actually talking to nobody, that it's talking to itself, it's talking to thoughts, thoughts talking to thoughts about thoughts, and having problems with thoughts. And you as the awareness, the pure awareness of self, have nothing to do with that process at all. So if you're really convinced that you've always been that one that's been everywhere and you are living as that, then when ego arises, there's no back and forth. There's no grabbing a hold of and letting go of any of it. Even if it does rise up and try to exert control, if you're sure of what you are, you won't even be able to try to grasp a hold of thoughts anymore, because there'll be nothing inside you that can grab onto anything. You'll just be more like this and less like the ego's like this, isn't it? You know, grabbing and pushing, usually both at the same time. So if there's any of this ego arising still and this back and forward going on that's being described here, then there just needs to be a little deeper seeing of what you really are. And as that begins to really pervade your entire existence, ego's voice will be like a voice on the wind, you know. You'll be really struggling to hear what it says. And even if you can, it really won't mean anything to you. Like somebody talking to you in Chinese, it'll just be Chinese, you know. And there'll be nothing in you that can be compelled by it, more importantly. It's not the thinkingness itself, is it? It's the obsessive compulsive tendency we have as human beings to consistently listen to mind all the time, like no choice. That compulsion, I appear compelled to live this way. Compulsion will go as you deepen in that seeing of what you really are. The way to do that is to really become curious as to whether that one being was ever divided into two or more. Because the last place we believe in a division is between our old way of being and our new way, our real way, what we've seen to be true. As you come to know that you are that which is everywhere, and you always were, then anything that mind says to you and everything that mind says to your ego will become obsolete, just not relevant to you anymore. Is there really those two states? Are you really going backwards and forwards from one to the other? Are you really going from this pure place of seeing back to ego? Is that really happening? It really seems to be happening, but is it really happening? Is there really two places? Is there really two modes of being? Or were you always just the one being? And at some point you were convinced you were separate being. And now you're coming to see that you've never been that. But was there ever actually this other way of perceiving? Very good questions. Would anyone like to ask a question or to share? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello.
I kind of been working hard on. There's a couple of things I wanted to talk about. There's a couple. One of the things was about cause and effect, and it sort of I kind of think I'm there, or not. But can you just explain to me how the ego sees cause and effect, and how you might see cause and effect? Somebody who's had awakening sees, well, not or doesn't see cause and effect. Can you explain to me how that works?
Yeah, our conventional way of thinking about things is that I am the causal factor. My thoughts are causing these things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that one thing causes another, basically. So, and that's so commonly believed, isn't it, in the human kingdom? Everybody believes that. In fact, we can even become super paranoid on the pathway of trying desperately hard not to think negative thoughts in case it causes something bad to manifest.
Okay.
But in the seeing of what you are, there isn't two. There is only one. Cause something that causes something, and an effect is two things. That can't be the ultimate truth. And in the end, you come to see that nothing is causing anything to occur. It's just arising out of that silent space of the one. So if you ask a question, it didn't cause an answer, or if you have a thought, it's not going to cause your body to get up and move, which is probably the place we most completely believe in cause and effect. Ego is convinced that this causes that, and it basically, the way that it manifests is we all start off this pathway convinced that everything that's happening out there is causing us to feel a certain way inside. When you do that thing that I really don't like you doing, I feel really bad inside. Mm-hmm. Or when you do that thing that I really want you to do, I feel really good inside. Or when I have what I want, I feel good. When I don't have what I want, I feel bad. It is the basic, simplistic egoic way of thinking. And as you wake up, you see it really isn't that way. Nothing can cause you to think or feel a certain way at all inside. And nothing actually out there can cause anything to happen in here. And vice versa. We all can get a little bit obsessed with law of attraction along the pathway. Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with that. But we can really deeply believe what I'm thinking and feeling here is going to cause something to manifest out there. So there's still two things. I'm the causal factor, mm-hmm. and I'm making something happen out there. Mm-hmm. But if out there is just a reflection and not actually outside of you, if it is you, mm-hmm. then there can't really be this cause and effect. Mm-hmm. So why is everything happening the way it does then? Mm-hmm. Every possible thing that manifests is the highest possibility that's possible in any moment to show up. And it just does that automatically manifestation. Mm. It'll be appearing as whichever way it wants to appear, the highest thing. If we just get out of the way of that process, it'll show up. And mind, the ego really has a problem with this. Like, what do you mean nothing causes anything? Mm. Like, why does the world keep turning then? And why do I get out of bed in the morning? If me going to work isn't causing money to come in, if it's just happening, why am I doing that then, But our whole thought structure is based on, the whole of the mind really hinges on, and the egoic sense of self hinges on this cause and effect causality.
So if the bird lands on the branch and that causes the fruit, or to all intents and purposes, the bird lands on the branch and the piece of fruit falls on the ground.
At the same moment.
Yeah. At the same moment.
Ego says the bird caused the fruit to fall.
But it was always going to happen.
It just happened.
Yeah.
There was nothing, because the bird is the fruit and the branch and the tree.
Okay.
In reality, there isn't a bird separate to the fruit. It's all the one being showing up as those things. Mm. Ego says this, I am sure that this caused that. And then with its conviction that there is a causality, it goes around asking, why is this happening? What's causing it? On this endless, fruitless search to find out why. Why Is the world the way it is? And he even does it in the spiritual process. Why is there illusion? Why does the one bother with all of this? Why does it just, you know? And as incredible as it is, there is no causal connection between the bird and the fruit falling, the bird landing and the fruit falling. It will always look that way, won't it? It'll always look like that caused that, but that needs two things, the bird and the fruit, and there is only the one being. Really, the bird just happened to land at the same moment as the fruit fell.
It's that sort of simplistic, beautiful engineering of the now, I guess, or whatever it is.
Yeah, was the fruit going to fall anyway if the bird didn't land? Who knows? Yeah. But to be absolutely convinced that the bird caused the fruit to fall is going to lead to this division. There's a division then between the bird and the fruit that really isn't there in reality.
That's duality, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you see, there's a whole underpinning of the egoic sense of self.
Yeah.
If I do this spiritual work, that will cause me to wake up. If I do my self-inquiry or meditation, and if I do enough satsang and all of that, then it will cause enlightenment. And if I don't do it right, conversely, I won't get there. And doing something wrong can cause it not to happen. And eventually, you see, you were just going to wake up anyway. You know, you end up in satsang because you were going to wake up anyway, which is a bit of a kick in the teeth when we've really tried our hardest as a seeker. That none of our efforts actually ever led us anywhere spiritually.
Damn.
And even everything we've worked and strived hard to get was going to come anyway. We've probably even slowed it down with our massive efforting towards, you know, slowed down the arrival of it. But the upside of realizing that is you kind of then can just sit back and be that effortless self. Your body might be very busy as per that question, but you are doing nothing and everything is just arising. And the more you live from that place, what arises is what you wanted anyway, and even better than you could ever imagine. You know, it just shows up and it surprises you. And it's a much easier way to live than this striving, trying, needing, you know, trying desperately hard to feel grateful for what you already have when it's not what you want. It's not really going to work, as I found out.
So it's that kind of simplistic beauty of how everything just sort of comes together all at once. It's sort of synchronicity.
You want what you want because it's going to show up anyway. Why would you ever find yourself in satsang or something if you weren't destined to wake up? It's just ludicrous to think otherwise. And if we get this idea, especially in our satsang, that really the only thing we're doing here is to begin to progressively listen to less and less thoughts. And when we do that, eventually we listen to no thought. But we might listen, but we can't believe in them. Then enlightenment happens spontaneously to the mind and body, and you are as you always were, just the witness of it all. And it just happened by itself in the end, which is a real kick in the teeth to the ego that really wants to feel like it's reached enlightenment. You know, you see how it plays out in the spiritual search itself.
Yeah, that becomes a duality thing as well. Like you say, the search and the ego takes over that.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do to reach enlightenment, ironically. So what are we all doing here, listening to this? You know, to come to clearly understand that.
So the ego is part of that ladder process to get you to that realization of that. So you need it for that seeking thing to get you.
Yeah, the last desire is the desire to wake up, but even that has to go in the end. Because it's a statement of the fact that it's not already happened, it's not already there. If you really desire to wake up, then you're really sure you're not awake already. And that means we're still functioning from this sense of being someone or something, trying to get somewhere. You know, and then as you see clearly, do I even need enlightenment mean what I really am? Is that even seeking for anything? Even the great lofty enlightenment or awakening? No, it's not. And in that, the body, when that seeing deepens, and the body and mind experience this enlightenment, you could call it, but it happened without a causal factor.
Wow.
Strange, but true.
Good to know.
And then you relax when you get this. You relax, it's going to happen. You can't screw it up. You can only slow it down with all your trying to get there.
Yeah. So the chasing pushes it further away.
Yeah, but we need that because our energy and our attention is so scattered throughout our world, trying to fix all these things out here that we think are going wrong, and trying to get our outer world to look a certain way. But sometimes we need that seeking mode at first to kind of focus all our energies back into one agenda, and eventually that even must be let go of.
So if it's not about out there, but it's about in here, then where does that intellectual process end and that kind of leap of faith take place? You know, like, because I guess the brain can only take you so far. Yeah, what mine does anyway. Might be somebody else, it might be different for other people, I don't know, but it's like, and I feel like I've taken a kind of a leap of faith from what I've heard and from what I've been reading, but from what, you know, what you've taught me from reading, you know, the Dissolving the Ego book and Reality Check and stuff. It occurs to me that there is this kind of thing where you've just got to go with it.
Well, if you keep asking the questions with the mind, do the self-inquiry, eventually you'll see that you don't need anything. You, the formless reality, even to wake up, because you are not the one that forgot in the first place. You've been unchanged forever. And remembering and forgetting become just not valued, as you don't even have to remember what you are. You are already before that even. You're not even involved in that process, because that's happening in thought only. An epiphany, a realization is just a thought occurring. And suddenly a new thought arises that you didn't have the capacity to think in your mind. It feels fresh, it feels new. It's wow, it just feels like it's revealed. But it's still of the mind, and you're still just watching. From the highest thought of I know what I am, to the lowest thought of I'm never going to get this, I don't deserve to live, type of thing. But you're watching all of that. You know, it's just,
they're all thoughts.
The whole enlightenment journey from start to finish is happening in the mind only. The pure awareness is the pure awareness, is the pure awareness. It's never been changed or modified at all. So there's no surrender needed when that's really seeing deeply, no letting go, no faith needed, none of that, because it's clearer and clearer that none of this is anything to do with me. You know, you are the one being, whether you're convinced that you're a separate being or you've realized what you are. You're still the same, haven't actually changed. You just have more pleasant thoughts when you're awake.
Great.
Good questions.
Okay, thank you.
Would anyone else like to ask?
It's not a difficult one. It's kind of like I feel really, really peaceful, and I don't think about enlightenment, and I don't think about seeking anymore.
That's good.
And I just feel generally in a peaceful, happy state. And I do have the odd moment where I kind of wondered if there would be something that would disturb the peace. Because recently a few things have happened that didn't really disturb the peace when I expected it to.
It's nice that you can really see how far you've come when something that would normally trigger some intense emotion.
I am a bit curious as to how it will work out, but not in a worried way. But more a bit of a...
It's a watching the unfoldment of it,
Yeah. But the thing that then, when I had this day a few weeks back, and I think it was partly because I've got a really good friend whose son died during the summer when he was only 22. And around the time thinking about that, it got me thinking that I've been through a lot of stuff myself, and I kind of think I've let go of it all, but then I'm thinking, what would be the worst thing that could possibly happen that might disturb the peace? And then that night I had a really awful dream about my eldest son dying, And I think it was like triggered with thinking about this friend whose son has died.
Yeah.
And it was almost like them thinking, I don't think I could cope with that. I think that would knock me off balance. Because I think that would be possibly the worst thing.
Yeah.
But then I was feeling bad for supplying to that, and was thinking, like, then I think I don't want to manifest it. But that, I don't know where I'm going with this really. I just wanted to talk to you about it.
Cause and
really
effect that we were just talking about.
Yeah,
If I think about this too much, it will show up.
Yeah.
Because that's what seems to be happening.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
But that's why I was also this friend who's lost his son, feeling really, really kind of a lot of sadness. Not it's not sadness that I'm feeling like personally, but I don't like seeing her looking she's in such a bad way.
Yeah.
And feeling a little bit like wanting to make it to do stuff to her, but no, it's kind of the way she's got to work her own way through it.
Yeah.
But prior to this happening with her son, she was actually in a really, really good place, and she was going around doing talks about not enlightenment as such, but like dealing with a lot of issues, and it's almost like this has been yet one massive thing to challenge her in her maybe process. I've mentioned this group to her, and she's interested in coming as well, but it might be a thing for her. But I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm kind of thinking out loud, really.
That's okay.
Maybe it was just that there's still a little bit of a fear underneath, thinking that maybe if something really, really massive did happen, then there's something that I might not be really able to deal with, and not wanting to kind of wish that on myself.
Yeah. It's we tend to think of it as a line that we're going to reach, where, you know, but if you as you started out by saying, there's things that don't affect you anymore, can't cause you to suffer, that would have in the past, you know. So it's more of a continuous unfolding of that, and less, as you said again, less worrying about how something is going to turn out, and more of curiosity. How is this going to resolve itself? It must resolve itself somehow. Let me just see what happens. And that becomes more and more your way of being, doesn't it? Rather than trying to figure out what to do about something.
Yeah, there's kind of like a little bit of a temptation to sort of want to interfere versus that just letting it unfold. And I feel like I'm at the moment quite comfortable just letting it unfold. And
gradually, as it progresses, the awakening deepens, there'll just be less and less ability to have both of those modes going on. The trying to figure it outness will drop away, or even the seeming choice between the two, and there'll just be this watching everything. A seeming problem will arise, and then a solution, and then another problem, and then a solution, and it just resolves itself.
Recognizing the solution.
It will be obvious, you know, that the more awake you get, the more you can feel how something is going to work before you. You know, as a separate being, sometimes we do something, and, you know, our old sense of self, and afterwards you go, that really wasn't a good thing to do, or I shouldn't have done that. But there'll be more and more, the more awake you get, the more you can sense there's these two options here. I seem to have two choices. One of them just smells funny, you know, energetically. It's just, I don't get a good feeling when I think about doing that. And that feeling becomes strong. And then I look at this other option, you know, the more awake you get, the clearer it is to see, you know, which is the right one to do without actually taking any action first. You just know more, you know, more clearly, whether you call it intuition or not, but it becomes so very loud that even if mind is saying you do this rather than that one, you just know. It might not make any logical sense at all what you end up actually doing, you know, to work around something, but you'll see afterwards, oh, that's why that happened, you know, that's why I did it that way, you know. So it's more of a switch over to that way of being, and eventually you lose the capacity to think on purpose, to figure out, to sit and puzzle through a problem, you know, or to worry or have any concern for how it's going to unfold, because you see it's unfolding the best way it can and the quickest way it can already. Anything I do to try and ease that process along is going to actually get in the way, probably, you know, and slow down. Whatever's going to show up is the highest manifestation of that, for that situation.
So it's just in the instance kind of thing.
Yeah, just knowing how every time we let go of thoughts about something, believing thoughts, things always get better in the outside world as a reflection. Always. Whether that be our body or our finances or our relationships or whatever way it's showing up. That as we let go of the thinkingness that most human beings do, which is, what am I going to do about this? What if I make the wrong decision? I did make the wrong decision. What am I going to do now? You know, and second guessing all the time. Without all that wasted energy on thinking, it's very, very clear in that moment what the best thing is to do. You might not be able to explain it to anyone, but you just know it's the right thing to do. Or the opposite, it's really not the thing to do. You know, everyone's going, you should do that. And you're like, I just know, I don't really want to. You know, I've just got this really strong feeling inside. Because you are all of this, so, you know, of course you're going to have a very strong intuition which way the manifestation is going, because it's not separate to you. You know, which way it's going to unfold, you, some level, you know, because you are that. You know, your brain won't be able to figure that out. Nobody's brain can. But you'll just have this clarity, and even with the situation as you were describing, that whatever that lady is going through is what she needs to go through. It might not be anything we would ever choose to experience, but she will come out the other side of that a very much different person, you know, having survived something like that. And we all have those, the things that teach us most are the things that we would absolutely never wish to experience. That's the way it goes for most of us, isn't it? You know, we'd all choose nice, easy things to learn from, but it really doesn't always work that way. It was good.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And more and more, it's just a letting go of any trying to manage the process of life. You know, just the watching and unfolding. And in that, you just cope with things you never thought you could. You get through things you never thought you could. You know, maybe not so graciously at first, but then, wow, that didn't impact me like I thought it would. You know, if I'd have gone through that 5 years ago, it would have flattened me. But I got through it, and because the peace is it's enormously powerful, and it cushions you from even the worst human emotion, doesn't it? Or the hardest, not worst, but the toughest of emotions. You know, it's good. Don't think of it as a finish line. You're always going to be more and more bulletproof as you kind of go through the rest of your life. And life may ask more of you in that respect, but you will pass that test every time as that peace grows. Good stuff. Very good. Anyone else like to ask? Yeah, sure.
So it was like realizing what I'm kind of, and I've seen differences. It's realizing what I'm getting from being here, even over a few weeks I've been coming. I was in a meeting with the big boss on Friday. He was back and forth and saying, you can do this with this new system, you can do that with the new system, you're going to follow this and all this, and I could feel that fear and anxiety, and that I'm starting to get a bit overwhelmed. But then I could hear it was like, yeah, hear the questions from Satsang, sort of saying, hang on, what's overwhelming, what's fearful, what's anxious. It was like watching a temperature gauge. So I watched it go up, and I sort of took a step back and watched it go back down again, and it was just, oh, because it was just weird how I.
Is that a situation where normally you would have got very anxious?
Fearful and anxious and overwhelmed. I would have got quite panicky maybe. And it was just, yeah. And I just want to share that whatever's happening is happening, even if I think, if I think things aren't really, you know. And it did make me think afterwards. I'm thinking again, I suppose, but
nothing wrong with thinking, especially healthy thinking.
Later on in the day and over the weekend, that over these last 3 months, when I've stepped away from the thoughts, there's been a few situations which I can't prove, but I believe that by stepping away from the thoughts and going with the flow, happened a lot better, worked out a lot better.
They literally manifest differently in that moment.
They have.
If you believe thoughts, they go that way.
Yeah.
If you don't believe the thoughts, or you at least make an effort to step back, they go very differently.
And it was just, I thought, I just wanted to share that because it was just been.
It's lovely when your spirituality starts to really impact your life on a very ordinary level, a very mundane way, you know, in a situation where, because we all have those places where we tend to forget what we've learned in Satsang, maybe, and it's more of a challenge. And I found for a certain amount of time I was having to put effort in to remember the question, you know, to really value the question that whatever I was asking at the time. Like, what am I? Where am I? Who, you know, who's suffering? You know, am I really suffering? Or whatever question I was contemplating. And then at some point, it got a hold of me, and it just kind of grabbed a hold of me, and it was just there. Automatically, the question was just there, and there wasn't any having to remember to ask it anymore. At a certain point, it's just on autopilot, and even our mind then is enjoying asking the question and seeing the change, the very literal change in what shows up as you ask that question, moment to moment, how instantaneous the question can be at changing the course of what happens in that next few moments.
It's just how it was just. Yeah.
And the manifestations change, you know, as you continue with the question, the big scary boss will be off sick that day or on holiday, and you'll get this guy standing in who's really quite nice, and you'll end up chatting about meditation or something, you know, little things like that. You're probably going to laugh at this, but one of my biggest challenges ever was the dentist. Hated the dentist. Not actually the dentist, it was just like terror, you know, anxiety, awful. And for a long time, I avoided going because I didn't like feeling that fear. And then, of course, I got all spiritual and like sat in the chair and wait, who's scared? Who's like, you know? And every 6 months, I'd go through this same process, and I'd notice how much further I'd come, you know, on each checkup. And I'm sat in the chair, and all he's doing is a checkup on, you know. And he probably thought I was nuts. He's really quite a nice guy, I have to say. He wasn't horrible. And then one day, I was about 2 or 3 years into, you know, really deep into my self-inquiry. And the dentist phoned up and said, "Can we change your appointment?" I thought, oh, something must be happening here. So I said, yeah, that's fine. So I turned up, and he's retired, and his wife has taken over his practice, who's also a dentist. And she's into meditation. She's like, she was reading the Power of Now book, you know, Eckhart Tolle, and we ended up, well, as much of a conversation you can have when your mouth, you know, completely had a really nice chat with her and really enjoyed it. And totally different manifestation has happened. But each time I went before that, there was less and less fear, more and more peace. And even when there was fear, there was peace. And then I really, really saw that, you know, there was absolutely nothing to be scared of at all. But it's been one of my biggest teachers, you know, the dentist, and ironic as it is, funny as it is. But and then even this time, last time I went, even her assistant had changed. Her assistant, you know, the one that writes down the numbers, and they're shouting out 4 and 3, and you're like, oh, that sounds bad. Even her assistant had changed, this really nice woman, you know, because she was quite brusque and official, you know, didn't really have much of a bedside manner, the assistant. So even the assistant. So I'm kind of excited now because I go back in March to see what's happened this time, you know. We'll see. But yeah.
And the other thing was,
sorry, my ramblings.
The other thing as well that I mentioned it to, I think I mentioned it to Maggie last week. There was my grand's broken her ankle, so she's in this nursing home. She does not want to be in, but it's very. At first, I could feel the distress because she's bedridden, and then when she started talking, I could just go, "Yeah, that's my gran," and I could kind of look past. Oh, she's very comfy. She's bedridden, but I could look past that bit of distress I saw at seeing her bedridden. Is to see that she's still my gran. That's quite, and I don't know whether I'd have been more distressed if I'd been started.
You have a choice whether to let that emotion affect you personally, or whether that just to let that emotion that arises just arise. And there's a choice, and you've always got a choice there. If we take that emotion personally, that I'm distressed and I'm, you know, really, and it changes the whole situation. But if that, even if that emotion arises, of course you might feel that way at first, you know, and then, but there's a recognition that she really is okay underneath that, you know, and what's going on the surface. She is that self, that silence, just like you. And there's you wouldn't choose for that to happen to her, of course, but you don't have to let this negative emotion bowl you over then.
No.
That's really good. There's two sort of everyday normal situations where you're really seeing the results of what you're doing, you know, your intensity and your consistency. Yeah. Excellent. Very, very good. Would anyone else like to share or ask anything? You're not going to talk about a dentist, are you?
Just been interesting listening, and everything's totally relevant as usual. It was two things really. I've had kind of amazing few weeks, and recognising that my mind's completely gone blank. Recognising that everything, whenever a thought appears, it's all about me. Everything is just there. It's just happening with no input at all from me. And every now and again, this thought will put out doing, what's going to happen about that? And it's all about me and how I perceive, or how I need, or what I think. And when you recognise that isn't true, you can't attach to it anymore. And I was just sitting listening to someone talking a few weeks ago, and I just recognised that you know, people talk about, I think it was one of the persons who talked about, and I've talked about it many times, about the ego popping up. But it doesn't, it feels like it doesn't, it seems like it does. It's just thought. Everything that is seen or thought or felt or believed is just a thought from here. And just like sitting there and listening, So there's no attachment to it anymore.
It's, in reality, there's just a body and thoughts appearing, maybe experiencing odd emotion arises, and it's all just coming and going spontaneously. But then ego pops up, and it's my emotion, my thoughts, my progress, and it's always referencing, arcing back to itself. Like how it looks from here only, the rest of the universe, you know, and any thought, eventually it's clear, any thought, any emotion, any experience, any revelation, any epiphany, any awakening experience is happening to an entity here. And also any surrender, any letting go, any devotion, any of it.
I see it because it's pretty quiet now, and then just now and again there'll be this thought about something, and it's not an issue. It happened actually listening to Anne talking, and because I was thinking about, I always felt like that. What if something terrible is going to happen? What if something terrible is going to happen? And then it did. And I was listening and it took me back because this time last year, and there was emotion came up, and I can hear my voice now. But even that's just a thought about.
You've lost that central processing unit, the core of the ego that's trying to assess all the time, what does this mean to me? In the seeing that you've always been the indivisible one that's everywhere, then anything that happens in a body and mind are just what's happening in a body and mind, and there is no capacity then to grab a hold of those. You just cannot do.
When I was listening and thinking about the journey of the last year, and I know that you seem to have a journey, you seem to have revelations, and you seem to have suffering that pushes you through. And I wouldn't wish to go through what happened last year, this time last year again. I know that was what was needed to eradicate what I believed was an ego, believing all that and feeling all of that.
It finally becomes too painful for the great consciousness to think of itself as just being in one location. That just becomes too painful. And then everything it tries to do to get out of that also adds the pain, because it reinforces this idea. And then it tries to find, it's heard this thing, enlightenment, it chases after it, trying to escape its problems. And then in the end, it sees that there really was never any entity here. There was just thoughts about being someone, which are not an actual someone. And in that, your whole capacity to suffer just vanishes completely, instantaneously.
You can't explain that. I mean, to general man in the street.
I wouldn't even try if I were you.
Because I kind of hesitated to get up, because I thought, well, what if the people involved hear it and that's just a thought again.
It's the same thing I'm going on about banging on about the same thing every week.
I was just, I was just aware of, like, I used to really, really worry, what if, and I was completely confronted with
the worst case
scenario. We'd had many practices at it that didn't have any impact. Kind of emotionally they did. And then the worst we were confronted with, what about this? And it all was okay.
In that great consciousness, if there is any negative emotions arising, or any negative thoughts. They're just arising. And they're just arising in that great space of your being. And there is no nothing left in you solid that can be bowled over by these thoughts or emotions.
I can see how it's been eradicated over the year. I can see how I was sat there thinking, how was I in Satsang this time last year? And I'd say totally different. Very open and seen a lot and had many revelations. Totally different.
And in what you're seeing is, it doesn't matter, there's only the one being, the consciousness. It's everywhere. And it's thinking about itself in each human body, convinced that it's a separate being. But in the end, the seeing is that that's never actually ever been true. No matter how convinced I've been that I was separate. And then how convinced I am that I've got to come back to the one or the wholeness, or that something can stop me from doing that, or all of that is just seemed to be imagination. In the end, it never occurred.
I think you summed it up today when we were out with the dog this morning, and you said something like, "I'm just like Archie, just like him, running around. Where is it? What can I do?"
Life,
life. That was it. Life, yeah.
All this enlightenment, where's it got me to have as much fun as the dog did this morning? Probably more actually. That is that is the greatest freedom then, because whatever occurs, the rest of this body's existence, and any event, any experience, no matter what thoughts or emotions it produces, you cannot contract around them and believe they're mine. Then they're just thoughts and emotions and can be felt freely and allowed to evaporate back into the...
And sometimes they do, little things will just appear. I've seen them appear, and there's no attachment to them anymore. And then lovely things happen, like I could have sat tonight and thought, this time last year, last Saturday before Christmas, and could have sat in fear of what if we go home. I don't feel like that at all. Didn't even enter it at all. But also, if there's a situation occurred tonight where I know that's not the case because of how it panned out the situation at home tonight.
And there's a huge difference between being someone on the pathway that's progressively letting go of more and more thoughts, and actually being the one that has never believed any thoughts. And when that shift finally, just that seeing occurs, oh my God, I've made the whole thing up. The whole thing, I've made it up. That's like gloriously freeing.
I've seen that and felt that, and then there's flickers of it, but it's very, very quiet. And every now and again, I've got a thought again. It's fun.
It's all just going on inside the vastness of your being. Stuff going on in your mind, of people's mind. Everything that goes on is just happening inside that space of your being then. And there is no ability to take any of it personally anymore. It's just blasted in that seeing completely.
Such a relief, but
the last division is trying to get back from how I used to think about myself back to the one. And that seems to be so vital and true for such a long time.
If you know that those thoughts from here are not true, that you know that there isn't it.
And there isn't a single thought that can survive that seeing. That's still being true. Because they're all happening to something here, an entity here. Even my journey back to the one is obliterated in that. And there is only the one left. The only thing that survives that seeing is the one. As it's always been. Without the one, without imagination, finally.
There's thoughts before, but they're just not bought anymore. They don't know what's sticking.
They become quite humorous.
Yeah,
After
I
a
was
while.
just going to say that. It comes quite funny. Like a reaction to something, and you just think, oh, well, that was just happening.
Mhm.
There's no anger or like.
I mean, really,
driving.
from where you are now, what is it to do with you if a thought or an emotion arises in your body? It's none of your business, is it? You just leave it alone to get on with it. Let it resolve, and it's in the peace that comes with that seeing. Unbreakable peace then, because there isn't any egoic fragments to pop up, and when they do, if they do still, they're like ghost stories. You know, what I just like if you have a bad dream at night and you wake up, you've no urge to go and fix what happened in the dream, even if later on in the day you have a little momentary remembrance of the fear that came in that dream or whatever it was. You still don't feel you have to run and sort that out because it just wasn't real.
It's so refreshing not in a horrible way, but no, I can't offend anyone. I can just be honest. I mean, not in a sense that I could just say anything that really offends, but knowing that I can't do that, that whatever is said or whatever movement is made is just happening. There's nothing there.
There's a peace in knowing whatever is showing up right now is what needs to be here, because reality doesn't do mistakes. It might seem like a mistake to our human mind when it can't see the greater picture, but whatever is happening is exactly what needs to be occurring.
And in that, I don't worry about how I'm going to deal with the situation. I don't sit and think, well, how am I going to deal with this, because this doesn't happen anymore.
There's nothing energetic within you that can do that. How does this relate to me here when it's been so clearly seen that there never was a me here? What has always been here is that which has been everywhere. Only thinking has confused it, really. You know, then it's you're home free.
Yeah.
Well done, you. Thank you for sharing that. Good. Okay. We shall leave it there tonight. Thank you. Namaste.